The breaking point. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Federation stretched before Ambassador Elena Rodriguez like a vast ocean of alien faces. She had walked these polished corridors for 12 years, representing humanity with dignity and patience. Today, however, that patience had finally reached its limit. Elena stood at the human delegation's small platform, watching as Chancellor Zarthok of the Velthari Empire addressed the assembly. His purple skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and his 4 eyes swept across the chamber with practiced arrogance. The translation device in Elena's ear converted his clicking speech into words that made her blood boil. The motion to grant the humans a permanent seat on the High Council is denied, Zarthok announced. While we appreciate their enthusiasm, they lack the wisdom that comes with millennia of spacefaring experience. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline consortium's representative, Minister Creon, shifted uncomfortably in her diamond-like form, but said nothing. The ancient ethereal collective remained silent as always, their ghostly forms flickering with what might have been disapproval or indifference. Elena felt her aide, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, tense beside her. After 60 years in the Federation, after proving themselves in countless ways, humanity was still treated like junior members at the adult table. The numbers told a different story, though. Elena pulled up her personal data pad and reviewed the statistics that Chancellor Zarthok conveniently ignored. Humans provided 63% of the Federation's military forces. Human engineers maintained the hyperspace relay networks that kept the galaxy connected. Human doctors had developed cures for 17 different alien diseases. Human agricultural techniques fed 3 entire star systems. Yet when it came time for real decision-making, humanity was dismissed as too young, too emotional, too unpredictable. Captain Marcus Webb knew exactly what Elena was feeling. His battle-scarred face reflected years of fighting other people's wars while being treated like a hired gun. He stood on the bridge of the UFS Determination, watching his fleet patrol the outer rim territories where the real dangers lurked. "Captain, we're receiving another distress signal from the Kepler mining colonies," reported his communications officer. "Vorthan raiders are hitting the supply convoys again." Marcus nodded grimly. The Velthari owned those colonies, but couldn't be bothered to protect them properly. That job fell to human ships and human crews who risked their lives for aliens who barely acknowledged their existence. "Set course for the Kepler system," he ordered. "Standard formation. And someone send word to the Federation that we're handling another situation they're too busy to deal with." His tactical officer, Commander Lisa Park, looked up from her console. "Sir, that's the 15th raid this month. The Velthari keep expanding into dangerous territory, but expect us to clean up the mess." "That's what we do, Commander," Marcus replied, though his voice carried an edge of frustration. "We're the Federation's cleanup crew." 3,000 light-years away, Dr. Sarah Kim was having her own moment of revelation. She stood in her laboratory aboard the medical station orbiting New Geneva, staring at a communication that had just arrived from the Galactic Medical Council. The message was brief and insulting. Her groundbreaking work on cellular regeneration therapy, which could extend the lifespan of virtually any organic species, had been reviewed and improved by a team of Velthari scientists. They would be presenting it as their own discovery at next month's medical symposium. Dr. Kim's hands shook as she read the message again. 5 years of research, countless trials, breakthrough after breakthrough. And now the credit would go to aliens who had contributed nothing but their names to the final report. Her research assistant, Dr. James Park, entered the lab and immediately noticed her expression. "What's wrong, Sarah?" She handed him the datapad. "Read it." James scanned the message, his face darkening with each line. "They can't do this. This is your work, your discovery. According to Federation scientific protocols, all research conducted in Federation space becomes the property of the collective scientific community," Sarah quoted bitterly. "What they don't mention is that the collective apparently doesn't include humans when it comes to getting credit." Back on Earth, President Maria Santos sat in the Oval Office of the United Earth Government, surrounded by advisors and military officials. The wall screen displayed reports from across human space, each one telling the same story of exploitation and disrespect. "How many times have we asked for equal representation on the High Council?" she asked her chief of staff. 17 formal requests over the past 20 years, came the reply. All denied. General David Kim, head of Earth's military forces, leaned forward in his chair. "Madam President, our people are getting tired of being treated like second-class citizens. Captain Webb's reports from the Outer Rim are particularly concerning. We're losing ships and personnel protecting alien interests while being excluded from decisions about Federation policy." President Santos nodded slowly. She had been elected on a platform of human dignity and equality within the Federation. So far, she had achieved neither. "What about our economic contributions?" she asked. Treasury Secretary Janet Liu pulled up a holographic display showing trade flows and resource exchanges. "We export raw materials, manufactured goods, and advanced technology to Federation worlds at below-market prices. In return, we import finished products at premium costs. The trade imbalance is nearly 3 trillion credits annually. And they wonder why we want a voice in economic policy," President Santos muttered. The final straw came 3 days later. Elena Rodriguez was attending what she assumed would be a routine Federation Security Council meeting when Chancellor Zarthok made an announcement that left her speechless. "The Federation has decided to relocate the Orpheus Nebula mining operations to Veltheri oversight," he declared. "The current human administrators have proven inadequate for such a crucial resource extraction project." Elena stood so quickly that her chair fell backward. The Orpheus Nebula contained the largest known deposits of quantum crystals in the galaxy. Human prospectors had discovered it. Human engineers had built the extraction facilities, and human workers had died in cave-ins and equipment failures to make it profitable. "On what grounds?" Elena demanded, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. Zarthok's 4 eyes fixed on her with obvious disdain. "The Veltheri have centuries more experience in large-scale mining operations. Surely you understand that efficiency requires proper leadership." "Proper leadership." Elena's voice rose. "Human engineers designed every piece of equipment in that facility. Human scientists developed the extraction techniques. Human workers built everything from the orbital platforms to the transportation networks." "Yes," Zarthok replied with a dismissive wave of one purple hand. "And now that the hard work is done, it's time for proper management." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the usually chattering insectoid delegates stopped their clicking and buzzing. Minister Creon's crystal form flickered with what Elena had learned to recognize as embarrassment. Elena looked around the chamber at faces that showed everything from smug satisfaction to uncomfortable guilt. Not one alien delegate spoke up in humanity's defense. Not one questioned the blatant theft of human achievements. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope that she had hoped never to use. Breaking the diplomatic seal, she unfolded the document inside and began to read in a clear, steady voice. "By unanimous vote of the United Earth Government and the Colonial Assembly, humanity hereby withdraws from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, effective immediately." The explosion of noise that followed was deafening. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Translation systems struggled to keep up, and Chancellor Zarthok's purple face turned an alarming shade of green. "This is preposterous," he bellowed. "You cannot simply leave the Federation. There are contracts, obligations, agreements." Elena folded the document carefully and placed it back in her jacket. "All contracts signed under duress or through deceptive practices are hereby null and void. All Federation personnel have 72 hours to evacuate human space. All human personnel will be withdrawn from Federation territory within 30 days. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at the chaos erupting throughout the chamber. "Oh, and Chancellor, you wanted proper management of the Orpheus facility. As of now, it's shut down. Find your own quantum crystals." As Elena walked out of the Federation Assembly Hall for the last time, She could hear Zarthok screaming about legal obligations and trade agreements. Behind her, the greatest political alliance in galactic history was about to learn what happened when you took human patience for granted. The message went out across the galaxy within hours. Humanity was no longer part of the Federation. At first, the reaction was exactly what Elena had expected: laughter, disbelief, and threats of economic retaliation. On Veltheri Prime, Chancellor Zarthok called an emergency session of his advisors. "This is clearly a negotiating tactic," he declared. "The humans are trying to force better terms. They'll be back within a month, begging for raid mission." His military advisor, General Krathum, wasn't so sure. "Sir, our intelligence reports suggest this decision has overwhelming support among human populations. Their military is already pulling back from outer rim patrols." "Let them," Zarthok waved dismissively. "We survived for thousands of years before the humans arrived. We'll manage just fine without them." But across the galaxy, other voices were beginning to express concern. Minister Creon of the Crystalline Consortium sent private messages to several moderate delegates, warning that humanity's withdrawal could have serious consequences. The Ethereal Collective, rarely heard from in Federation politics, issued a statement that chilled many readers. The removal of stabilizing elements from complex systems often results in catastrophic failure. Captain Marcus Webb received his withdrawal orders while his fleet was engaged in a firefight with Vorthan raiders near the Kepler colonies. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps it couldn't have been better. "Sir, we're getting emergency transmissions from the mining platforms," reported his communications officer. "The raiders have broken through the inner perimeter." Marcus looked at the tactical display, showing his ships locked in combat with the alien pirates. Below them, thousands of Veltheri civilians were in danger. The old Marcus would have ignored his orders until the job was done. But these weren't his people anymore. "All ships, this is Admiral Webb," he transmitted. "Break off engagement and form up for jump to hyperspace. We're going home." "Sir," his tactical officer looked confused. "What about the colonies?" Marcus stared at the display for a long moment, watching as raider ships moved toward the helpless mining platforms. "Not our problem anymore, Commander. The Veltheri wanted to handle their own affairs. Let them." As the human fleet jumped away, leaving the Kepler colonies to their fate, the first crack appeared in the foundation that had held the galaxy together for 6 decades. The age of human patience was over. The age of consequences was about to begin. The reckoning. 3 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Federation, Chancellor Zarthok stood in his emergency command center, watching his empire crumble in real time. The massive holographic display showed red warning indicators spreading across Veltheri space like a plague. "Sir, we've lost contact with another 12 outer rim colonies," reported his aide, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "The Vorthan raiders have taken complete control of the Kepler sector." Zarthok's 4 eyes blazed with fury. "Where are our defense fleets?" "Engaged in 17 different sectors, sir. We don't have enough ships to cover all the territories we've acquired over the past decade." The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. For 60 years, human ships had provided the backbone of Federation defense, allowing species like the Veltheri to expand their territories without having to actually defend them. Now, with human protection gone, the galaxy's predators were having a feeding frenzy. General Krathum entered the command center carrying a data pad filled with disaster reports. "Chancellor, the situation is worse than we initially assessed. Without human patrol fleets, pirate activity has increased by 400%. 17 major trade routes are now too dangerous for civilian traffic." "What about our own military?" Zarthok demanded. "We have excellent ships, sir, but nowhere near enough of them. Human forces made up over 60% of our active patrol strength. Our military focused on prestige projects instead of practical defense." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in the capitals of every Federation member species. The crystalline consortium was watching their trade networks collapse as shipping companies refused to travel unescorted routes. The ancient ethereal collective, despite their advanced technology, had grown too dependent on human-maintained infrastructure to function independently. Dr. Sarah Kim's withdrawal from Federation medical networks was causing crises that government officials had never imagined. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, a plague was spreading through the Corlin population, a species whose immune system had been weakened by generations of genetic modification. The Corlin ambassador to the Federation, a desperate being named Velatar, sent increasingly frantic messages to anyone who would listen. "Please, we need Dr. Kim's cellular regeneration therapy. Our people are dying by the thousands." But Dr. Kim was no longer answering Federation communications. She was too busy setting up medical research facilities in human space, finally free to pursue her work without having it stolen by alien bureaucrats. Back on Earth, President Santos received daily briefings on the chaos spreading through Federation space. Her advisors were divided on how to respond. "Madam President," said Secretary of State Robert Chung, "we're receiving hundreds of requests for humanitarian aid. Entire planets are suffering because they can't maintain the infrastructure we built for them." Admiral Chen, recently promoted to head of Human Defense Command, disagreed. "With respect, Mr. Secretary, these are the same people who called us too emotional and inexperienced to have a voice in Federation policy. Now they want our help." President Santos studied the reports in silence. Part of her felt genuine sympathy for the suffering civilians, but another part remembered the years of condescension and exploitation that had led to this moment. "What's our defensive posture?" she asked Admiral Chen. "Better than ever, ma'am. All our forces are consolidated in human space. We've activated the defense networks around every human world. If anyone tries to force us back into the Federation, they'll find we're not as helpless as they assumed." Captain Marcus Webb was discovering just how formidable human defenses could be when properly concentrated. Instead of scattered across the galaxy protecting alien interests, the human fleet was now focused on human space. Advanced ships that had been built with human technology, but operated under Federation oversight, were revealing capabilities that had been carefully hidden for decades. "Sir, the quantum stealth systems are performing beyond all expectations," reported Commander Park from the bridge of the newly retrofitted USS Determination. "Federation sensors can't detect us even at close range." Marcus smiled grimly. "The Velthari always assumed we were showing them our best technology. They'd never realized we were holding back." The truth was the human engineers had been quietly developing advanced systems for years, but Federation oversight had limited what they could deploy. Now, freed from alien bureaucracy, human innovation was unleashing itself across the fleet. Minister Creon of the Crystalline Consortium was one of the few alien leaders who understood the full scope of the crisis. Her crystalline form flickered with agitation as she tried to convince her fellow council members to take action. "You don't understand," she told the emergency session of the Federation Council. "The humans weren't just muscle for hire. They were the foundation that our entire civilization was built upon." Chancellor Zarthok remained defiant despite the disasters piling up around him. "The humans are trying to blackmail us into giving them special treatment. We will not negotiate with terrorists." "Terrorists." Creon's voice rose to a crystal-sharp pitch. "They've attacked no one, threatened no one, and stolen nothing. They simply left, and their departure is exposing how completely dependent we have become on their work." She activated a holographic display showing economic data that made several council members gasp. Human agricultural techniques were feeding 3 billion people across 47 worlds. Human medicine was keeping 2 entire species from extinction. Human engineering was maintaining the hyperspace relay network that connects every major trade route in the galaxy. The ethereal representative, speaking for the first time in months, added in their whispered mental voice, "The humans gave us 60 years to learn to stand on our own. We chose instead to lean on them more heavily with each passing year. But pride runs deep in old civilizations. Chancellor Zarathok refused to admit that his empire needed humanity more than humanity needed the Federation. Instead, he chose to escalate. If the humans think they can abandon their obligations and hide in their corner of space, they are mistaken, he declared. The Federation will impose economic sanctions until they return to their proper place. The sanctions were swift and comprehensive. Federation worlds stopped buying human goods, froze human assets, and closed their borders to human ships. The alien leaders expected humanity to fold within weeks. They were in for a surprise. President Santos called an emergency session of Earth's Parliament to address the crisis. The Federation has declared economic war on humanity, she announced. They seem to think we can't survive without them. The Parliament chamber erupted in laughter. Secretary Liu stood to present the economic analysis that had taken her team 3 days to compile. The Federation imports 93 billion credits worth of human goods annually, she began. We import 27 billion credits worth of Federation products. The trade imbalance has been subsidizing their economies for decades. She activated a display showing human space in relation to the rest of the galaxy. Moreover, we control the 4 major hyperspace nexus points that connect the Federation's eastern and western territories. If we close those routes to Federation traffic, their transportation costs will increase by over 300%. Admiral Chen added the military perspective. Our defensive positions are nearly impregnable. We control the only stable wormhole connecting this galactic arm to the core worlds. Any military action against us would require crossing 30,000 light-years of space we now control. President Santos nodded slowly. It seems the Federation has forgotten who was actually dependent on whom. The next morning, humanity's response to the sanctions was swift and devastating. Every hyperspace relay station in human space went dark to Federation traffic. Human agricultural worlds stopped shipping food to Federation markets. Human medical facilities closed their doors to alien patients. Most importantly, Dr. Sarah Kim announced that all human-developed medical technologies would now be restricted to human space until further notice. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. On Veltheri Prime, the orbital city of Nexus Station began experiencing power failures as its human-designed fusion reactors started breaking down without proper maintenance. The crystalline beings of the consortium watched their trade empire collapse as shipping routes became impassable. But the cruelest blow came to the Corlin species on Harvest Prime. With their plague spreading and no access to human medicine, their government finally swallowed its pride and sent a direct message to Dr. Kim. Please, Ambassador Veltar begged in a transmission that was broadcast across human space. Our people are dying. We were wrong to support the theft of your research. We will publicly acknowledge your discoveries and pay any price you ask. But please help us. Dr. Kim watched the message in her laboratory, surrounded by her human research team. The old Sarah would have immediately sent aid, regardless of politics. But the new Sarah had learned that kindness without respect was just another form of exploitation. Send a response, she told her communications officer. We'll provide the medical aid they need, but only under specific conditions. First, the Corlin government must formally acknowledge that the cellular regeneration therapy was developed by human scientists. Second, they must pay full market price for the treatment. Third, they must withdraw their support for the economic sanctions against humanity. Within hours, the Corlin government agreed to all conditions. It was the first crack in the Federation's unified front against humanity. Chancellor Zarathok was furious when he learned of the Corlin's betrayal. They'd broken ranks with the Federation to deal directly with the humans, he raged. This cannot be allowed to stand. But General Krathum brought even worse news. Sir, we're receiving similar requests from 17 other member species. The Ethereal Collective is asking for human engineers to repair their atmospheric processors. The insectoid hive worlds need human agricultural consultants to prevent famine. Even our own outer colonies are begging for human military protection. The reality was finally sinking in. Humanity hadn't been the junior partner in the Federation. They had been the indispensable partner. Everything from medical research to military defense to basic infrastructure had become dependent on human expertise and human labor. Minister Creon saw the writing on the wall and made a decision that would save her people. She secretly contacted President Santos directly, bypassing the Federation entirely. President Santos, she began her message. The Crystalline Consortium formally apologizes for our role in the exploitation of humanity. We would like to negotiate a new trade agreement between our peoples, based on mutual respect and equal partnership. President Santos shared the message with her cabinet. It seems some of our former allies are beginning to understand the situation. What should our response be? Asked Secretary Chang. President Santos smiled. We'll be happy to negotiate, but on our terms this time. Equal partnership means equal voice in all decisions. Fair trade means fair prices for our goods and services. And respect means never again being treated as the hired help while others take credit for our achievements. The negotiations took weeks, but they resulted in humanity's first truly equal alliance since joining the galactic community. The Crystalline Consortium became an independent partner, separate from the failing Federation. Other species began following suit. The ethereal collective quietly approached humanity with offers of technological exchange. Several smaller worlds broke away from the Federation entirely to join a new alliance centered around human space. Chancellor Zarthok watched his empire continue to crumble. The Vorthan raiders had taken complete control of the Outer Rim territories. 3 major trade routes had collapsed entirely. Food shortages were developing on 17 worlds as human agricultural support disappeared. Finally, his own military commanders forced the issue. General Krathum entered the Chancellor's office with a data pad that contained the signature of every senior military officer in the Velthari fleet. Sir, we formally request that you authorize negotiations with the humans for renewed military cooperation, he said quietly. Our forces cannot maintain order without their support. Zarthok's pride warred with his sense of survival. What would be the terms? Equal partnership, sir. A voice in Federation policy proportional to their contributions. Fair trade agreements. And a formal apology for the treatment they received over the past 60 years. The words tasted like poison in Zarthok's mouth, but the alternative was watching his empire collapse completely. Send the message, he said finally. President Santos received the Velthari request for negotiations with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that humanity had finally proven its worth, sadness that it had taken such a crisis to achieve basic respect. What are your terms? Asked the Velthari negotiator during the first meeting. President Santos had prepared for this moment. Full representation on the High Council. Equal voice in all military operations. Fair compensation for human goods and services, and a public acknowledgement that humanity's contributions to galactic civilization have been systematically undervalued. The negotiator's purple skin turned pale. These terms would essentially make humans equal partners in galactic governance. That's exactly what they would do, President Santos replied calmly. After 60 years of being treated as junior members, we're finally ready to be treated as equals. The negotiations lasted for months, but eventually, a new agreement was reached. The Galactic Federation was restructured as the Galactic Alliance, with humanity holding equal status alongside the other founding species. Elena Rodriguez returned to the galactic capital, not as a supplicant seeking recognition, but as the equal representative of a respected civilization. The assembly hall looked the same, but everything had changed. When she took her place at the new human seat on the High Council, the chamber fell silent. She looked around at faces that now showed respect instead of condescension, understanding instead of dismissal. The human delegation would like to make a statement, she began. Chancellor Zarthok, looking older and more tired than when she had last seen him, nodded respectfully. The chair recognizes the human representative. Elena stood and addressed the chamber that had once treated her as a second-class citizen. For 60 years, humanity sought nothing more than to be treated as equal partners in the galactic community. We offered our skills, our lives, and our loyalty in service of the common good. In return, we asked only for respect and a voice in the decisions that affected all our peoples. She paused, letting her words sink in. When that respect was denied, we chose to leave rather than accept continued exploitation. What followed was not our fault, but it was our responsibility to help heal the damage once we were offered true partnership. The chamber remained silent as Elena continued. Today, we return not as the junior members of a federation that never valued us, but as equal partners in an alliance that recognizes the worth of all its members. This is what we should have been from the beginning. As Elena took her seat on the High Council for the first time, applause filled the chamber. It was the sound of a galaxy finally learning to show respect where it was due. Captain Marcus Webb patrolled the trade routes once again, but this time as an equal partner rather than a hired gun. Dr. Sarah Kim shared her medical breakthroughs freely, but now received proper credit and compensation for her work. The age of human patience had ended, but the age of human partnership had begun, and the galaxy was stronger for it.